Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys joining me for today's episode. Guys, today I want to have a conversation on fishing line as far as how you pick the pound test of fishing line for the area, for the techniques and lures you're going to be fishing, because the pound test of line that you choose has a lot to do with your bait's performance, what it does, what it can't do, the action that it has on the bait. So I sort of want to give you guys a good foundational little seminar here on different bait categories and that type of stuff. I think it's definitely going to add up to some good fish for you guys. And also I want to put my Seaguar Fishing line link in the description of my Tackle Warehouse link, guys. I use, as far as my fishing line, there's two different lines I use. I use the Seaguar Invisex fluorocarbon, and I use the Seaguar Smackdown braid in some situations. So I'll have the link in the description. If you don't have any preference on line and you want to try some really good line, you can use that link to get you some Seaguar. I really appreciate that. Okay, when you're talking about choosing pound test line, there's a lot of considerations that goes way beyond just the obvious. There's a ton of different things, because based upon the pound test of the line that you're using, every pound test of line has a different diameter. And that diameter is going to affect the performance of the lure that you fish. For example, the lighter the line that you fish, the deeper your bait's going to run. Like if it's a lip lure, the farther you're going to be able to cast, the less power you're going to have, the less ability to move the fish. And then as you go to heavier lines, there's sort of a gradient that goes with that. As you step up in line size, you lose your different type of falls on there, different type of angle falls. You lose the depth attainment on lip lures. You increase the power that you have over fish. So every lure category has a place for different pound test lines. So given that, here's what you want to do. You have to determine what you're fishing as far as to be able to allow the most efficiency and to allow the bait to perform how it's needed to perform. So let's say, for example, we're out jerkbait fishing in clear water in the wintertime. And when you're jerkbait fishing during that situation, you're trying to get your jerkbait down to its maximum depth. So in a situation like that, I may go to 6 pound test line, because if I go to 6 pound test line, I'm going to be able to get my jerkbait down probably 2 feet deeper than maybe 3 feet deeper than if I was using 10 pound test line. So that's going to allow me to get down that extra 2 or 3 feet. That's probably going to generate me a lot more strikes. But then at the same time, let's say we're fishing that jerkbait and there's a ton of standing timber. It's like you're fishing in a thick standing or submergent timber area. Then you have the consideration of fish breaking you off. You're on 6 pound test line, you got heavy cover, so you have to make that determination and find that common ground between having the power to control the fish and getting your bait down into that zone there. So there's always that consideration. This could be, you can also relate this to like pitching and flipping. Let's say, for example, you're pitching and flipping isolated pilings, something like that, just clean isolated pilings. You might be able to get by with flipping like 15 or 17 pound test line. But let's say, for example, you're pitching and flipping way back underneath a dock where there's 20 different pilings back there. Maybe there's somebody planted a brush pile under the dock. It's a lot thicker and gnarlier cover. You're not going to be able to use 15 pound tests. You may have to go up to 20 pound tests. So every situation is unique to itself in terms of generating the strike and getting the fish out. Now, I tend to go on the side of you have to get the bite before you can land the fish. So most of the time, I don't want to go too heavy on the line that I'm fishing unless it doesn't make any difference. So if I'm crankbait fishing, or if I'm fishing a jig, or if I'm fishing a worm or something like that, I want to get the bite. So I know that a lighter bite is going to be lighter line. The diameter is going to be less visible to the fish, so that's going to allow me to get more bites. I'm going to be able to make a longer cast, which is going to allow me to get more bites. My lure is probably going to have more action on it, so that's going to allow me to get more bites. So in a lot of situations, guys, I may use lighter line than most people. That's why a lot of times I'll use 8 to 10 pound test line on crankbaits, where a lot of guys are using 12 to 15 pound test line. Now, the only exception to that rule is if I'm pitching and flipping heavy cover. When I'm pitching and flipping heavy cover, I'm using mainly 25-pound test Seaguar fluorocarbon line, or like a 40 or 50-pound test braid if I'm flipping like matted vegetation or something super, super thick. Because when you're dropping a bait straight down on the fish like that and the water is off-colored, your line diameter and the fall rate of that is probably not as critical as it is with other stuff when you're trying to get down through limbs or something. So in a situation like that, I need the maximum power. So I'm not going to worry about the line size. I want to be able to get that fish out of that thick cover when that fish bites, and you can't do that if you downsize. So when you're talking about lure categories like crankbaits, your line size is going to determine a lot about how deep you want that crankbait to run. That's the main thing. A crankbait and a jerkbait, the line size is going to determine your depth attainment. But if you're fishing another category of bait, like a slow bait, like a jig or worm or a football head jig, something like that, that's not the issue. You're not concerned about the depth attainment of that particular bait because it's going to go to the bottom regardless. The other consideration on a slow bait like that is how the diameter of the line is going to affect the action of that lure. So let's say, for example, you're throwing a little 4-inch worm on a shaky head that's got a 16th ounce head on it. Even though that bait's going to get down to the bottom if you have 20-pound test on it, and it's not going to allow you to have any depth limitations, when you have 20-pound test line on a little 4-inch worm on a little shaky head, you're not going to be able to manipulate that bait. It's going to float too high. You're not going to be able to shake it, and it's not going to have that little twitching action. So in a situation like that, you want to go to light line. You want to go to 6 to 8-pound test line because it's going to be less visible to the fish. The bait's going to look more realistic when you move it like that. So that's a big consideration with that. So you've got your bottom baits and you've got your lipped lures like that. The other categories, which would be something like a swim bait or a spinner bait or a chatter bait or a topwater lure, you can always go heavy. So if you're fishing a swim bait, guys, let's say like a Megabass Mag Draft or a spinner bait or a chatter bait, don't be concerned about the line size because it's not going to make any difference if you're using fluorocarbon line, the number of bites that you get. The only thing that line size is going to do on that particular bait category is going to affect your casting distance. Your casting distance is going to be less with heavier lines, so that's the consideration there. And the same with topwater. Topwater, the line size is irrelevant other than the casting distance you can attain with heavier line. So that's the main thing, guys, is like when you're trying to determine line size, look at all the factors. Look at the cover you're fishing, look at the water clarity that you're fishing, look at the bait category that you're fishing, how that bait, moves or doesn't move very well with different line sizes, and then make an accurate determination, on the line size that you need. So anyway, I hope that helps out, guys, and we'll check in later.